of the song as you hear it here on Channel Africa, a beautiful piece of music put together by Ntomb'Yelanga Thobekile Mbanda featuring Cool Air. That is so beautiful. A merge. I'm hearing a different sounds, different generations meeting in a piece of music. And I think this is going to be such a tremendous lesson for today's ancestral sounds. As per tradition here on the program, every single Friday we come through with this feature. Because for generations, African communities have used music not only for entertainment, but also to carry stories, to tell the stories, to preserve our history, to pass down knowledge and strengthen cultural identity. Yet many of the indigenous instruments that have shaped these traditions are at risk of being forgotten, and that's precisely why this feature exists. But today we're going to be exploring the world of ancestral sounds with indigenous instrument maker, educator and cultural preservationist Ntomb'Yelanga Thobekile Mbanda is joining me on the line. She's going to help us get an understanding of how she's helping to revive traditional African instrumentation while also showing how they continue to inspire contemporary music and creativity. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show, Ms. Mbanda. Thank you for the time.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was such, I want to start by unpacking that song, Vuma with Cool Air. Talk to us about the song, because like I'd mentioned, my experience of it was really beautiful because you took me through various timelines. You know, I was in the 40s 1 minute, I was in the Lali the next minute, I'm back in the city, but it's really just so wholesome. Talk to us about how you compose and perhaps using that song as an example.
Thank you. Good morning, Channel Africa listeners, and thank you for having me today. So Uvuma is basically an unspoken agreement with those before us of what is our role and responsibility as the next generation in line. So I'm an 80s baby, so we're the new adults, and some of us don't even know funeral songs.
We are.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so the song is basically that ukuvuma is to agree in accepting your role and responsibility, because as a traditional instrument player, the notion is that the grandmothers before me gave me this instrument to learn and to play, and then what I do, I then now make it my own and rework it and give it back to society. So that's basically the foundation of Uvuma.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Actually, Uvuma is definitely, highlighting being in agreement with spirit,
Yes.
At this time. For someone that's maybe experiencing these instruments or experiencing this type of music in the modern era for the first time, why is it important? I think perhaps from your perspective, why is it so important to sort of preserve African history and culture through music?
Well, for me, indigenous instruments are not artifacts. They are technologies of information, and they are technologies of connection, not only with our ancestral understanding of our existence and our connection to God, and also, most importantly, our connection to nature. So before I make a bow instrument, I need to be in agreement with the tree that's giving me the wood to make the stick. And also I'm in agreement with the calabash that has taken 6 months in darkness to come out and then help me create the sound. So my work, I consider myself an Afro-musicologist, which means I have an embodied knowledge and understanding of these instruments. But it's not only me. It's actually part of us as Africans. We have embodied knowledge within our bodies that can only show itself if we have regulated nervous systems that are at peace with who they are and who have agreed to who they are, So the value of us being connected with these instruments is that they're just technologies of information that can help us grow and be able to sustain ourselves in this changing world that we find ourselves in.
I love that perspective. I love the honoring of the instrument before you even begin to play it. honoring how it was created, honoring nature being able to have given you the tools in the first place to be able to have something that you can form into an instrument. In conversation with Ntomb'Yelanga, she is an Afromusicologist, a composer, and a teacher of this great music in this modern age. And I like that we're having these conversations in the modern age, because this then forms part of the discourse of preservation work. Engaging in dialogue is just as important as well. But when we move around, sometimes we're very surprised by people being shocked at how many musical instruments are available on the continent, how many indigenous instruments still exist. Could you perhaps introduce us to a few? You speak about the calabash, which could turn into uhati, which could turn into makoyane, and several others. But let's talk about some of the instruments that you are currently teaching us about through your compositions and just through your education work in communities.
Yeah, definitely. We have a wide range. Whatever nature can provide, it's already musical. So one of my favorites is umchingo, which is a mouth bow that comes from the ocean, actually. The seaweed, when it's dry, it has this long, hollow sound that we use as umchingo. I don't know if you want to hear the sounds.
I'd love to. I'd love to hear.
So in this society now, though, because in our area, KZN, we've lost a lot of seaweed. So we also use PVC pipes. So it's more like a long-ish pipe. Then we have torotoro. Torotoro used to be made out of bamboo. They still do, but we also have like a modernized version. Then we also have umkrube, which is a mouthbow. The interesting thing about umkrube, though, that I'm finding, in other cultures, they played by hitting it. In the Xhosa culture, they played like a violin. And then there's a whistling that happens while this bow is in your mouth. So my research right now around umkrube is how language affects how we play instruments. Because then there has to be how your daily talking tongue responds to how it plays instruments, especially with mouth bows. And then we have the two breast bows, umakoya and nohadi, which exist pretty much throughout the whole of Africa. I've seen from northeast, west, and south in different names. And then we have the drum called ingungu. It's our Southern African version of a talking drum. It's played by pulling a bamboo stick, and then it creates this dynamic vibration and frequencies that are quite intense. And also with these instruments, what I've realized is that each of them speaks to a part of the body, right? Like imkhrupe, they're more about the throat chakra. The bows are more of the chest and vibration. I always believe that traditional healers, it's not also just about medicine. It's using instruments to bring people back to their frequency. Because all these illnesses that we are facing and hardship we're facing as Africans is also a reflection of how out of frequency we are within our own bodies.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a few of them. And then also obviously the kudu horns people know. And then we have aqua harps, which use water. And then you play with the friction of a bow or a tail of a horse. So there's no tomos, there's quite a few. I'm hoping one day I can put together a book of these instruments at play.
Oh, please put together the book. In fact, I was going to talk to you about that, because isn't it just wonderful, the connection between Sanskrit traditions and African traditions. I mean, you mentioned the chakras and the connection between the sonics and the physical being. I think it's so wonderful. But in fact, we're going to get into that in just a bit and really look at how you sort of conduct this work around preserving the knowledge. I mean, you mentioned the book as one of them, but we're going to continue conversations after the break.
The voice of the continent, now online with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more. Let the drums guide you through Amapiano energy and jazz sophistication on Jemba Vibes.
Somi Grammy-nominated jazz voice, Rwandan and Ugandan roots, born in the US but claimed by the African continent. But she's also honored Africa's Miriam Makeba. I'm South African. I can't talk to you without speaking about Ginger Me Slowly. In fact, that song has brought so much pressure on us South African men and how to treat our women.
It's not a song that I don't want to sing, but there are times when I feel like maybe I want to have a set that's a little more like, I don't know, that's sort of brewing in other emotional spaces. I still feel like, but I should do Ginger Me Slowly. It's kind of a joke now with my band. I love that it's a love song that people want to hear and that it occupies a kind of warm energy center for me.
Feel the heartbeat of the African continent. Afro beats, jazz grooves, and dancehall fire unite on Jemba Vibes. Sunday, 9 p.m. till 12 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Ancestral sounds on the channel.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the sacred space we know as Ancestral Sounds, exclusive to the Journal on Channel Africa. Ntomb'Yelanga Thobekile Mbanda continues to speak to us about ethnomusicology, the themes around instrumentation, indigenous forms of instrumentation, as it were. And this is now us tracing it all the way back to how our ancestors used to perceive sound and the sonics as one, as part of our being, not as something that is separate from us that we've now got to go and chase, but as something that we embody. And Ntomb'Yelanga is actually continuing that beautiful ancestral work at this time through, how she often describes sound as a form of memory and connection, as it were. But let's talk about, we often say this is now how we are preserving knowledge or preserving a certain type of storytelling, or how we preserve our narrative as African people. But what does that actually look like, do you think? And I want to make reference to your planned book around the instruments that you want to do, but what does it actually mean to preserve knowledge and stories in at this time in modern cultures?
Oh, beautiful question. So for me, the preservation of knowledge is in the doing. And I find that sometimes when we talk about preservation, we think of museums. And my struggle with that is then we are freezing our beings in space and time. Whereby when we, for example, with umakweyana and uhadi, the way we make them now, it has evolved from how our grandmothers or our ancestors before them were making them, in the sense that we have now started using tuning pegs as a way of carrying the instrument across genres of music, especially if we're working with not learned, because also the language is so tricky when we talk about indigenous knowledge. For some reason, because we are of embodied knowledge, oral transmission, observation, learners as Africans, we almost always want to say that it's informal. But in our informalness, we are also very formal because there's a system of learning, right? So, and also the body being the archive of sound, you are not separate from your body. So your body is always in remembrance of the teachings that were before you, and you just need to activate. So I guess how then do we keep it present in the modern time? It's training the African ear. Part of the work is also decolonizing the African ear. How do we hear sound? And what do we permit as music? Just as much as we ask universities what qualifies as knowledge of African music, outside the structures of Western ways of understanding music. So then our work as instrumentalists and preservation workers is to redefine and find a language that explains who we are. Because my thing is also, where I am now, I'm no longer asking for permission at the seat of universities in understanding indigenous music. I'm saying, what happens when the silent voices join the table? right? Which are these instruments, and the women and men, mostly women, who've been silenced in their bow playing traditions.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in terms of how the preservation looks like, and also society itself. It's just a matter of fine-tuning their ears to remember their own sounds, so that they continue existing through us playing these. Like with this project of the EP from Uvuma, that EP was just an experiment for me. What would be the exciting process of keeping the music in the forefront, or keeping the instruments in the forefront? So I did this collaboration with a DJ and producer, Where's My Meds, where we explored house music, we explored drum and bass. But all of this is done with the indigenous instruments. So that is also quite exciting, the options of preservation that we have.
I really enjoy how you hypothesize about this, especially in how you think about what knowledge is, because we obviously come from systems that have taught us that there's a certain type of knowledge system that is more superior than another, but we've got our own. And you actually make me think of Undabo Zulu, who often spoke post him putting together a really amazing jazz album, but really paying attention to themes of indigenous knowledge and music, and talking about perhaps possibly coming up with our own African form of staff notation. I thought, oh my goodness, our music is definitely in the right hands. It's just so unfortunate we've run out of time, Thobekile. But you speak of the EP. Where can we find it? Because I would love for whoever's listening to be privy to what else the offering has in store.
Thank you. You can find it on Spotify and Apple Music and on YouTube. It's called The Galactic Portal, and music by Ntomb'Yelanga. And I thank you so much for your time to invite me. And also I love your questions and the thoughtfulness, because it's beautiful, because interviewers are the ones that actually help us extract the information that we are harboring in our bodies.
Right.
Because being in academic space, also I realized that what's important is not the answer, it's the value of the question. What's the questions we are asking, So thank you so much for paying such careful attention to this work that we do as well as instrumentalists in African music.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ntomb'Yelanga. I hope that you'll be back on the show. I think you and I have lots more to talk about, because I really enjoy engaging with people that are thinkers, and that really interrogate their own work and the place of the work at this time, which is so important. So check out the EP, okay? It's available on YouTube. Just search Ntomb'Yelanga. The EP should be able to appear there with the song Vuma that we played, and so many others. It is 10:31. We're going to